the Bay Area. So
Mm.
I was raised on the peninsula in Redwood City back when it wasn't considered Silicon Valley. It was still it was still a little more working class, but
It
I
was
grew
more
up,
working class. Yeah.
yeah. And but I was in the Woodside Emerald Hills area, so kind of on the cusp of the the equestrian and
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
And then but my mother being a San Franciscan through and through, even though they were living in Redwood City when she was pregnant with me, when she had me, she knew she wanted to actually give birth to me in San Francisco. So on my birth certificate, it says place of birth, San Francisco.
Great.
That's the way she is.
I have a very dear friend, Aaron, whom Julia knows, who worked at CIA and then quit in 1992 to go to the other CIA, the Culinary Institute
Oh
of America. And she was a pastry chef and a darn good one, but realized she couldn't make any money that way. And so eventually started working for the state government of California. But the last time I saw her in October, she took me to her childhood home in Burlingame,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Hmm.
which is probably not too far away.
No, not far at all. Maybe like 20 minutes. Yeah.
Exactly. And there was a famous, whose name I cannot recall, but I will look it up and put it in the, as they say, the show notes. Uh, her house was designed by a pretty well-known architect in the Bay Area who built a lot of kind of nice modern homes,
Mm.
tract homes, all
Huh.
throughout the Bay Area. And so those, whoever that architect is, there's a premium to get those houses. So
Okay.
yeah, so it's kind of cool. So I was thinking, Abby, and I know that you're thinking about what to talk about, and Julia's perhaps thinking about what to talk about. I would love to hear the story about why the CIA didn't work out for you, or
Oh,
however,
Mm.
good idea.
however that is best described,
Jumping right in.
Yeah,
well,
right.
because
We don't really like the small talk.
I just think that there's a lot of people who contact me all the time. How do I get to work at the CIA? And a lot
Mhm.
of them, and I judge them perhaps, almost certainly I judge them too harshly or from a position of ignorance. Oh, a cat!
You
That
know, this is
may,
me. This is
it's,
Mingo.
it's
Hi,
cat, right?
Mingo.
Yeah. That may
This is
be
Mingo's
the
butt.
first cat we've had on Pandas,
Oh, hey.
which
Hey,
I
can
think
you can you hold up Mingo? Hi, Mingo.
is a real criticism of pandas that we've had so few cats.
Not
Maybe
enough cats.
they might be afraid of the pandas,
Oh, okay. All right.
right? Because the claws.
Yes. But
Yes, this is his place, so he
and how
hangs
long
out
have
with
you
me
had
all day.
Mingo?
Hmm?
How long have you had Mingo?
Oh, since 2010, he's
Oh,
16.
Oh, wow.
wow. And
Yeah,
hopefully in good health.
he's an old man, but this is his retirement,
Yeah,
so
oh, very good, very good.
yes.
Oh.
So why didn't it work out?
Yeah, well, let me
Um,
just say a
yeah,
couple of
yeah.
things. So in ignorance, I often, without full knowledge of this person, will kind of go, oh God, this is another typical person that wants to work at CIA. And I can go into what I mean by typical. And I always wanted less typical people to be interested in a CIA career. And
Yes.
but there's a downside to that, perhaps. So anyway, let me just introduce you. So, or you can introduce yourself, Abigail. You are Abigail Keyes.
It's actually Kai's, but
Keyes, you pronounce it Keyes.
I don't expect anybody to know that.
Yes,
Um,
Keyes.
it's
It's
related to Scottish Mackay or
oh, very
Mackay,
nice.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
or also Irish.
Yeah.
And
Right.
my yeah, paternal side of the family just decided that they were going to pronounce it Kai's. So
Okay.
yes, I don't even know where to start. So I am currently launching my book coaching and editing business. I've been writing my whole life. I've been doing freelance writing, blogging for various companies and whatnot. I am also a professional dancer and dance educator, and I teach two courses at a community college on dance history. One is modern and ballet, the other is dance around the world, which is really more where my heart is. It's like
Mm-hmm.
vernacular and quote unquote ethnic dance. And before that, yeah, I worked at the CIA for 8 years
Wow.
and have 2 degrees, undergrad in Near Eastern Studies from Princeton University, and then a master's in dance from Mills College, rest in peace,
I know
which
of
no longer
of
exists.
blessed memory in Oakland, correct?
Yeah,
A very famous school with a wonderful social history, I think.
Yeah.
it reminded me a lot of my Girl Scout experiences. This sort of incubator womb
Hmm.
for mostly women. The graduate programs at the time were accepting men and not, men and all genders. Um, but it felt like that space. They're sort of cultivating this more female-led, female-driven, femme-led, femme-driven. Just the energy is really different than, say, Princeton, where it's still quite masculine and
You don't say.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's me. That's
Mm.
my basic trajectory.
So I'm sure, when did you apply at to work at CIA?
Oh, well, interestingly, I did an internship at DIA
Oh,
this
I'm so sorry.
summer.
I'm
It
so
was actually
sorry.
great. It was really fun. It was great. I had a good time. And it was the summer of 2001. So, you can think about that timeline for a little bit. And I was at the Pentagon, the
Wow.
summer of 2001.
Were you there on September 11th?
I was not. I was already back at school.
But you sort of
Wow.
knew where that plane hit.
hmm And I worked in the Levant shop at the J2, which is the military
Maybe you can
intelligence.
explain what the Levant is for, I bet a lot of people who
Yeah,
don't know what the Levant means.
sure. So I'm like, is it worth getting a picture down from my wall? I'll just describe it. So the Levant is
Maybe
a
I can splice
European,
in a map
yeah,
Well,
here
a
in
it's
the other
right over
room.
European.
her. It's right over your shoulder
I
there.
know it's right there, but this is an old map. This actually might be interesting. Um, ooh, it might be a little glary, but so it's a part of the region that we call the Middle East, which also is a funky term because east of what, middle of what? But the region we call the Middle East, that includes,
So Western oriented.
yeah,
Yeah.
that includes the regions that we know of as Jordan, Israel, Palestine, Syria, um, um, Lebanon, and basically this area right here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the quote unquote Levant. Um, maybe a little bit of Western Iraq culturally, but that's so I was working mostly Syrian military stuff. They just put me there because I was doing Middle Eastern studies. So I did an internship there the summer of 2001, and that was sort of because I wanted to get into the agency. I think one is just a sense of service and using my skills and being able to work in my field of study, which can sometimes be a luxury for people graduating from college and actually being able to use their degree.
Now, were you
So
fluent in Arabic?
I wasn't and I'm still not. I'm good
You're
at
good in
Arabic.
Arabic. Yes. Well, yes, it's a very difficult language.
I know enough, but I didn't have to use it in my work, which, I wasn't doing translations or anything. So yeah, I applied, um, yeah, my senior year of college. So that was 2001, 2002. And of course, the world had changed then, and they were really ramping up the hiring. And I connected with a recruiter, and we just we connected, we became friends, and she helped get me in. And so I think I took was probably late August is when I started. So late August 2002. I was it wasn't Office of Iraq Analysis at the time, but I was what became that. I was there for like 2 weeks before I got shipped off to analyst training
Mm-hmm.
to, so I didn't really have that much on the ground or in the office experience before I went off to training, which I feel like I did a lot of things backwards.
Mm.
I was in the training program with people who had been working for like a year, and here I am only 2 weeks. I just barely started reading in, but they're like, "Oh, we need to get you trained so you can come back because we know things are going to happen in Iraq." It was sort of.
So let me just add for context there. So the idea of having how long was it at the time? The
What,
analyst
Cap?
training. Yeah, how long was
Oh,
it
it
at the
was like
time?
almost 6 months.
Yeah, the
It's a long
idea of
time.
actually having a training course for analysts was like new for
Hmm.
the CIA.
Wow. New
And
as of like the
new
21st
as of
century?
then, new as of
Wow.
then. You must have been attending one of the single digit cap classes.
I feel
Wow.
like we were 10, so
You
we
were
were
okay,
just
so were
getting into
you
double
were just
digits.
past that.
Wow.
CAP standing for Career Analyst Program.
Okay.
And so until then, everybody just got this kind of whatever happened to them on the job, really. And because it was new, a lot of, we hadn't yet gotten into the rhythm of you are onboarded and then you start CAP within a few weeks, days, weeks. So that's why you were in the course with a lot of people who'd been there already for a year.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things that sort of made me feel quite overwhelmed and feeling like I was
Mm.
drinking from a fire hose. And then the other thing that happened is I was, officially an analyst for 2 weeks. I go off to CAP for 6 months, and then the operations center needed people.
Oh.
So after CAP, I went right to the operations center,
Mm.
which actually was really fun. I people don't like shift work. They feel like it's not deep enough work because you're not really doing like deep analysis
Right.
as an ops center analyst. But I like the sort of just every day is different. You don't know what to expect. I liked working shifts because you're not really dealing with commute. There's this sort of weird liminal space thing that
Ooh,
happens
I love that.
with
Yes.
headquarters in the
Yeah.
middle of the night when no one's
Oh, I
there.
love
It's
it. I
really
love it.
peaceful and quiet. So anytime I had opportunities to work shifts after that, I usually volunteered
Yeah.
because I liked that quiet.
So
And
again,
yeah,
yeah, let
A
me
lot
just
gets done.
throw in a little bit of context here. So uh, back then, before computers, having 24-hour operation centers was really important. And you were probably there in its last few years of real importance because eventually um, everybody got desktop computers that delivered information right away, and people got used to working that way. And having a 24-hour operations center monitoring what's going on in the world all the time was you had CNN was less important. Now, Abby, I started my career in the operations center.
nice.
I started as a graduate intern at CIA, and because my portfolio, I mean, I'm assuming because my portfolio wasn't impressive enough for any actual regional office to hire me, I got hired by the operations center. And after 3 months, they asked me to stay. So I stayed and I loved it. I had the best time there. And a little bit of the CIA trivia here. Uh, at the CIA, all your papers that you're working in have to be put into what are called burn bags, which are these, large, the kind of paper bags you would put lawn trash in, big, tall trash
I
bag.
have a funny story about that. We'll
Okay,
have to
you
get back to
next. You
that.
next. I'm going to a funny story. Okay, so we loaded them up, and I remember there was a brief period where they were actually appeared to be excess dog food bags. Usually they were like generic brown paper bags, but we got a shipment once of some brand of dog food bags that we were using. Anyway, in every hallway, there's a chute, like a trash dump area where you throw the bag down the trash and it makes its way down to the ground floor. And in that, what you call the liminal space, when you're working in the operations center at 1 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and you're kind of pretty bored, we started talking to my colleague and I started talking to another colleague who was kind of naive, and we pretty much convinced him that you could ride the chute
I totally would believe that. I was just
all
gonna
the way down to the basement. And he
I
was
would be like,
ready.
I would do it.
He was ready to do it until we stopped him. And that's how I escaped a manslaughter charge. Okay, your turn, Abby.
My story is not nearly as funny, but I'm sure you understand that once you've been in this high security, very secretive environment for so long, especially starting when you're in your 20s, these formative years, you learn habits really quickly. So a few years ago, let me back this up even more. So Trader Joe's, this is related. Every Christmas, like holiday season, I should say holiday season, has a holiday themed bag, like paper bag for their groceries. And there was one year where their holiday themed paper bag had red and white stripes on it.
Oh.
And I'm going to Trader Joe's and I see this red and white striped bag, and I'm like, why are there burn bags out in public? What's happening? And I hadn't been working for, 10 years at this point. And I had this like heart reaction to these shopping bags at Trader Joe's. And
That's funny.
it doesn't matter. I think at that point, it doesn't matter how long you've been out, because you've internalized these practices so deeply.
Yes.
And so and I remember a friend of mine who we were in CAP together also having a reaction to the Trader Joe's holiday bag and going, what's happening? Because these are things that are never supposed to leave the building, right?
Right,
Matter of
right.
national security. So what are they doing in somebody's shopping cart at Trader Joe's? Well, obviously it wasn't a burn bag, but when you're
I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, is there an equivalent in the world of science? And I think there is. I'm not sure what you're talking about has to do with the link, between your heart reaction and the Trader Joe's burn bag. I'm not sure it has to do with the secrecy, but the age at which you were imprinted, because I mean, even to this day, if I see someone doing an electrophoresis gel the wrong way, I'm like, no, gotta switch it. So it's this early age bonding with your mentor, maybe. I don't know.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
and feeling a real sense of duty too, I think when you're young and you're more idealistic. I'm still very idealistic. But and also really wanting to do the right thing.
Me too.
Me too.
I'm very idealistic. I don't apologize for it. So what happened? Eventually you go back and the Iraq
Yeah,
War
so
is in full swing.
full swing. We watched it in the Ops Center live on CNN, and that was wild. Um, and so yeah, I go back to again, I'm not sure if it was OIA, Office of Iraq Analysis at the time, and ubiquitous they put me on emerging Sunni political issues, which was like that skit in The Life of Brian by Monty Python, where they're at the auditorium, the Colosseum, and there's all the different political groups, right? And you've got the People's Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front, and they're two different groups. That was basically watching the Sunnis try to get their act together. And um, I one thing about the Iraq thing that I think was hard for me, I didn't realize at the time, but I'm a highly sensitive person, and we're working a war, and there's a lot of death, and there's a lot of destruction, and I didn't realize it at the time, but now I reflect back and I think, oh, that was a little too much for me without having or knowing that I even needed emotional or like maybe even like therapeutic support. I think some people are a little more hardened to that, and I was having a hard time with these like morning meetings where every morning it would be these many American soldiers died and these many Iraqis died and we had a bombing and IED or improvisable explosive
Right.
device here and um I think that one, I don't think my personality was quite compatible for that, and two, I don't think that I had the support that I needed to be able to be in that environment. And I didn't think that I didn't even think to look for it, which was my own
Well,
thing. I don't know.
nor did anybody at the agency at the time. When you joined the agency, I've been working there for 23, 24 years. And the idea that people might be affected emotionally by this kind of work, I don't think had really crossed many people's mind.
Mm,
I'm sure it had crossed someone's mind, but not many people's mind. And the ethic at the CIA, which was, mostly masculine at the time, although rapidly changing, at least in terms of the actual people, the ethic was, you're just a tough guy. And I
hmm
remember when I, would talk to people of the generation before me who had served in Vietnam, and they told stories about being in Laos or Cambodia or whatever. What they would mostly talk about is how good the bird watching was. It was like, you know, they would just like this other stuff, it's just stuff that happens.
Compartmentalization
Yeah,
skills.
but the part
Yeah.
I really enjoyed was bird watching, and in Laos and Cambodia. So, you make a very good point about being a sensitive person. And one thing I'm curious how you feel about this. One thing that when I talk to people, I still talk at universities uh, about career at CIA. One of the things I tell them is if you're the kind of person for whom your personal views are just incredibly important to you, you have strong opinions and they're really important to you, you shouldn't work at the CIA. You know, I'm a Libra. I see both, and I grew up as a high school debater. I see both sides of every issue all the time. And it's hard for me to develop strong personal convictions on issues in the material world. Like I have strong
Mm-hmm.
convictions about, goodness and
Mhm,
kindness and
And wisdom.
rightness and evil.
mhm.
But about, the size of the Ukraine aid package, no, I don't have a strong conviction about that, right? So how do you agree, disagree, amend?
Um, I think it depends on what the convictions are about, because I do feel like you have strong convictions about certain elements. As far as what I saw was how an analysis could be done or should be done, and what kinds of people do we need to be recruiting so that we can avoid groupthink and stuffing ourselves into boxes and
But those
um,
aren't convictions about facts. Those are convictions
true,
about how to do things so that things go better. So
right?
Carmen's
That's true.
a developer. She develops, right? And so anything about development, she's going to have a major belief. But everything else, no,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But what
So
about what was your sense of you in that same wavelength? Were you
I'm I'm not the kind of person that makes um, judgment calls quickly. I don't know how Myers-Briggs friendly we are in this space, but um, I always come up as a introvert, intuitive thinking perceiver, and the perceiver part.
Oh no, I'm not thinking. I'm not thinking. I am
Ah,
feeling. I'm feeling, but otherwise we're the same.
yes, so the perceiving part is that you like to have as much information as possible before making a decision.
Mm.
And that can be really great and it can be really paralyzing at the same time because then you never make decisions because you're like, oh, I just need one more bit of information. So I I I'm very flexible in my thinking about facts, and that sounds really wishy-washy, but with regard to things that are um, scientifically researched, if we learn one thing and then there's a bunch of studies that come out that say something different, I'm like, well, here's the recent study, here's the recent evidence. Let's change our opinions about that. So, um, I I actually think that's a really good personality to have at a place like the agency, because the information you're getting can be so fluid and it can change all the time. But there is a detriment to, oh, let me just get one more piece of traffic. Let me get one more document without actually just like making a judgment call. So I do feel like there was a little bit of people would be at odds at each other, because you have people like me and then you have people going, no, this is definitely what's happening. I know this is happening. You're like, yeah, do you though?
Yeah,
Maybe?
right, right.
Yeah.
Is there a cool process, do you think? I mean, I don't know if this is going off topic, but I kind of want to know anyway. Is there a cool process you can think of, either of you, for helping those two groups of people work together, those kind of personalities? Because I see that all the time, not at CIA, just in the world of technology development or the world of academia. And is there a process? Because those are both important ways of being. Folks who don't get it paralyzed, that's a really valuable asset, right? So yeah, is there like a back and forth process? What do you think?
I felt a lot at the agency that no lesser a luminary than John McLaughlin, a great legendary CIA leader, stopped me outside once and said, Carmen, I don't even think we know why we disagree.
Mhm.
We don't have a way of solving disagreements, and often the disagreements persist even when we're not clear as to exactly why we disagree. And
Mm.
and I had to agree with him, and stupid. And there's that we didn't generally have a process. So basically, the manager decided the issue, or maybe the analyst that had more seniority, not necessarily the better analyst, would resolve the issue, or would get the right to pursue his position or her position. But no, there was no good process. I think they've worked on that a little bit more. And I know one of the things they teach on creativity in analysis is the value of creating a picture of your analysis, creating
Mm.
like capturing your analysis in a graphic way, getting you away from words, which can be
Mm.
charged. And then you like one person draws the picture and then the other person with the other view changes or adds to the picture or subtracts to represent their view. And that can be more that can lead to some reflection and some openness to different ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me expecting people not to agree is kind of the way to go. And then
Yeah.
using the information from these different personalities, there's got to be a process that can be developed for that. Okay, back into your
Well,
story.
let
So,
me just use an example here, which I heard someone say recently, and I've been wanting to use it, saving it. So there's a great deal of value in knowledge organizations, particularly like something at the CIA, on this whole idea that the facts, if we just figure out the facts, everything else is easy.
but
But but look at the American jury system.
yeah,
You'll
exactly.
have a jury, they will hear both sides of the story, they will get all the facts. The jury was to some extent hand chosen by the prosecution and the defense. And when it comes time to make a decision, they disagree, and you'll have a hung jury. So that clearly tells me that this idea that the facts can speak for themselves is highly flawed, although many, many, many people that are drawn to a career at CIA are drawn to it, or any other part of the intelligence community, are drawn to it because they want to be in a black and white world. They
Right.
want to
Do you
be
know
in a
where that,
fact-driven world.
but it comes from the same place that says to Abby, it never occurred to us that you might not be able to compartmentalize this. It's the same place because that world that doesn't expect the internal experience to differ, that expects that the only difference is on the outside where the facts are. And that once you know the facts, everyone who is rational will function the same. That world is the same world that thinks that your internal experience doesn't matter.
Oh, yes, exactly.
And there's uh, ignoring of this is going to feel like a really big idea. Ignoring of human nature. We are emotional creatures.
It is a big
Amen.
idea.
Amen.
We are emotional creatures, and it doesn't matter how many facts you present to somebody if they are invested in that viewpoint. And if you want to find a common ground with them, then you have to meet them on a more emotional level. And that takes, some people are really good at that just intuitively, and then some people can be trained to that. And this is why we go see therapists, right? Because we're trying to figure out our emotions. But just throwing a bunch of facts at someone isn't going to change their
No,
mind.
not
I
at
mean, how
all.
many times have, I mean, I'm totally guilty of having arguments with strangers on the internet, going, why don't they agree with me? I showed them all the facts. I don't do that anymore.
So I want to make sure we have time to talk about other parts
Yes, yes.
of what make you a
Sorry.
Renaissance woman. But
Uh, I
what
guess,
was the highlight? So I'm kind of inclined to kind of pose this question. What was the highlight of your time at the agency? And then what
ah,
eventually, including maybe something you learned there or experienced there that has stuck with you uh now almost 15 years later, right?
yeah.
And
And what eventually led you to leave? And
did you teach any dance classes there?
I did not teach any dance classes there. However, in my career analyst program, I should have brought it out. They gave these little funny awards, and I got Best Cap Belly Dancer Award because I didn't mention that my dance form is actually belly dance. This is the Middle Eastern connection. So, yes, I have a very ad hoc handwritten Best Cap Belly Dancer. Highlights. I I honestly, even though it was emotionally very rough, being in the middle of the Iraq situation from an analytical perspective and position was so formative to me because I felt like I was working with, and I mean, not just I felt like, I was working with these incredibly brilliant people. And here I am, 22 years old. I'm totally overwhelmed, and I'm watching these analysts put together these little pieces and back up their arguments with these little tiny pieces of information from, a report here, a report there. And it felt like magic.
Mm,
And I think it is magic. And
mm,
and what do you call it, intuition or whatever, but it felt like watching magic. And also being able to work with analysts in an editorial capacity, like writing reports and watching them explain, having them explain to me why they would move words around or why certain things didn't make sense to them, and that felt like an alchemy to me, the sort of alchemy of words and being able to present something coherently and clearly for a
great choice of word.
policymaker.
Great choice of words. Yeah.
Yeah, for a policymaker who has like 5 minutes to understand what this issue is. So while it's not like a specific moment, those are things that I carry with me in my current work and my teaching. Um, I do have a little highlight of when I was telling a member of the National Security Council that she was wrong about the falling position of women in Iraq, and she kept pushing back on me, saying, "Oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine." And I was like, "Yeah, is it though?" Um, and I was right, so I just like to pat myself on the shoulder for that. Um, Later, so I left the Office of Iraq Analysis Then I went on to work Libya for a little bit as the US was opening relations with Libya
Another hopeful place.
and Gaddafi, yeah. And then I just that wasn't really vibing with me, and I was like, I want to do something different. So one of my other weird special interests is epidemics and plagues. Oh, what a time to be alive. And so I was like, I want to go work at WMD and work in biological and chemical.
Weapons, WMD would be stand for Weapons of Mass Destruction, which is just a cheerful name for an office.
Yes. But that was really great. So I did that for a little bit before I left. And they were looking for someone who could look at the motivations for why states pursue chemical and biological weapons because they're banned and they're so volatile, especially biological weapons. They're not controllable. So you want to keep these programs a secret, so why start them in the first place? Like, how can they be a deterrent if they're supposed to be secret and you have the sort of, Dr. Strangelove conundrum happening there? And so they're like, oh, great, come on board and you can look at this issue. And um, that was great because it was a completely new position. Like I was just starting, I don't know, let's start this new line of analysis and get experts together and look at that. So I would say that was a highlight, being able to be on the front lines of that. And I always wonder what those analysts are doing now in 4 years on in a COVID world, because we were also looking at lab security, lab safety, things like that. And so I think also working as I'm going to use the acronym first, PSA, Presidential Support Analyst, basically helping put together the President's Daily Brief. Even though we weren't doing the analytical work, just being able to talk to the briefers and be in that space as they prepared their briefs for the day. It's like 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Again, that liminal space. And
that's your writer self.
yeah, and I think there was also kind of, because a lot of the PSAs were younger, there was a kind of summer camp vibe about it. And hearing the kinds of questions that the briefers would ask, because sometimes we'd have to call an analyst 4 o'clock in the morning and have a very cryptic conversation with them on the phone about what they had written. And I look back at that time really fondly. As one, it was fun, and two, it was really close to it was like the closest I ever got to the mission of being able to really be in contact with the policymakers, or at least one degree away from. Whereas if you're a junior analyst, you're a little further away from that, from the customer, as we like to say.
So you left.
And then I left. Part of it was my Saturn return. I left when I was 29. And so Saturn return is this idea that um, astrologically, it's the planets are in such a position that you reevaluate your life and um, decide that you need to make major changes.
And
So
what is your horoscope sign?
I am a Leo with Leo rising.
Ooh, you're a double Leo. I am a Libra with Aquarius rising. No, Libra with Aquarius moon and Scorpio rising.
Oh,
nice.
all right.
I feel like I'm very proud of my astrological details.
Yeah, I am too. I am Aquarius with Gemini moon, and I think I have a Leo rising.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a Gemini moon.
Yeah. Oh, so there's a great compatibility triangle here.
Yes.
I believe.
I think so.
Yes. Yeah, very nice.
Very nice. But every 28 years, your Saturn return. Mine is actually this year. I'll be 56 in February next year. So, so you took that as a hint from the universe.
There was, and then there were interpersonal or personal things. I was married, and the spouse was tangentially related to the work situation as well, and I felt like part of the way for me to get out of the marriage was to first get out of the job, which was
I thought
unfortunate.
I had
Yeah,
remembered you as being married. Well, no,
yeah,
that was totally stupid way of saying. I thought you had been married when I
yes,
knew you, and yes.
yeah. And other things that I got frustrated with, I think, are related to uh, the role models I had when I was growing up. So my father, he's retired now, but he is an architect, and for as long as I was growing up, he always worked for himself. He always owned his own business. And I was also around other people who were self-employed quite a bit. I was a competitive figure skater, so of course my coaches were self-employed. And so I always looked up to them as these role models. And then I found myself in this giant bureaucracy. And it felt really incongruous to sort of the role models that I had when I was growing up, and I was like, I want more control over my schedule, my life, where I aim my energies and things like that. So I think there was just a little bit of worldview shift.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm this was right at the beginning when we were starting to really think about creativity in analysis, and I felt like nobody really wanted to do it, and it was really frustrating. I was like, why aren't we doing these things that in the short term might be a little bit more work, but in the long term would really benefit everybody? And so that was frustrating, but really there was the personal thing of like, okay, I want to, I needed to overhaul a lot of things in my life, and one of them was this marriage that was not good for me. And unfortunately that sort of meant that all the peripheral things also had to kind of fall apart as well. um I hate commuting. I am not a morning person at all. So there were these like biological things too. Like I am a late riser. I don't really feel like I get any good work done until like after 11 a.m. So like the expectation that you're there at 8, and I'm like, yeah, but I am completely not functional between 8 and 11. So why am I here? And not really feeling like there was flexibility in that too. Like feeling
Hmm.
like I was like lazy if I came in later, even if I stayed later. Um, and that's all my personal perception. But again, I was 28. I don't know. Um, and I think also because we talked a little bit about my sort of whirlwind training, I I never really felt like I got the the real training that I needed to be good at the work. And I felt like I was always playing catch up. And my managers expected me to know stuff, but didn't really invest the time to teach me because they're like, "Oh, you went to CAP, you should know this." And I was like, "Yeah, but I don't." And there didn't ever seem like there was time enough or energy to really teach or mentor in the way that I felt like I needed to be mentored. And I should have spoken up, I think, a little bit more for myself, and I didn't realize that at the time that now I realize. And I think I also felt like I was bad at it.
Hmm. And no one disabused you of that notion?
Sometimes.
Well, there is this thing. Sorry, that was my computer yapping at me. There is like this phenomenon of team chief roulette that would occur. I think would occur in any organization. If you're lucky, you get a really good team chief who really likes to teach and work with analysts to develop them. If you're unlucky, you get the opposite. It's basically someone who wants to continue being the senior analyst, and being the manager gives them that final stamp of authority. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was a conflict, just a combination of lots of factors. And I am also, because I'm from California, I always wanted to go back to the West Coast,
Hmm.
and there weren't really opportunities for me to do
Right.
that within the
Right.
organization. And yeah, just it was a lot of things, and I don't think it was necessarily like the organization itself, I felt like my my experience plus my personality plus the work maybe weren't the most compatible.
Right, right.
And that's fine, because clearly it works for lots of other people. And I'm like glad that it works for
Yeah,
other people.
yeah.
And there is a part of me that's like, man, why did I quit? That was a good job. I had great benefits, like job security, great mission. I mean, there's so many people who would love to have a job like that. You know, it
Well,
wasn't
I
it
know it,
wasn't
you know, I feel like it was a loss for the CIA. Every time we lose one of people like you, it's like a real loss. I mean, all
uh,
losses are real, but we need those different perspectives, and there's clearly not enough of them. Uh, so, so what did you learn about writing as a way
oh
as
yeah.
a segue
Hmm.
into your I don't know, fourth or fifth profession here?
Yes.
Uh, what did you
I
learn about writing from the CIA, and what do you dismiss? I mean, the CIA, the analytic part of the CIA has a like the 10 commandments of writing that were etched in stone, and some of them are
right.
good and some of them are not good. So what do you have to say
Oh,
about that?
I feel like I learned so much about writing. Um, the clarity, being able to be clear and precise. You know, analysts, we love this word granularity, right? And that's using the most precise language with the fewest amount of words, but also to be the clearest, to write in the clearest way. And that concept of granularity has really guided me as a writer, especially as a nonfiction writer and a fiction writer.
Interesting.
Really trying to find that one word or that sentence construction that really is going to be the simplest yet most specific. And that's really I think one of the biggest things that I carry with me. Another one of the big concepts that I learned is that, right, if you have your analytical heading, everything underneath that analytical heading has to back that heading up. No tangents, no fluff, no unrelated stuff. And that means you have to have some shorter paper, then you have a shorter paper.
It's like the opposite of academic writing. Like you can't
Right.
get too thoughtful, like, oh, this would be interesting, but let me bring you back. It's like you don't do that.
Yeah, it's just very crisp. And in my own writing, obviously, there's, when you're not writing in this very specific format for this very specific audience, you have leeway to change that. But I do find when I'm reading other people's books, it's more nonfiction than not. They go off on tangents, and I'm like, how is this related to what you were just talking about? Like, where's the organization here? Why are we talking about this and then going back to that? Like, was your editor sleeping? Like, what's going on here? So, and people tell me with my own writing, they're like, wow, you're so clear, you're so organized. Like, you made these really complex topics really easy to understand. And I'm like, well, yeah, I worked at the CIA for 8, 9 years. That's what we did. So being able to effectively convey complex, complicated ideas and sometimes very emotional ideas. Now, does my writing get misinterpreted by people? Absolutely, because humans are emotional creatures and we will read into what we want to read into them and not even understand that we're reading into reading into it that way. But I would say, yeah, clarity of language and organization, this sort of fractal approach to writing, right? So you've
More
got the
about that.
big swirl.
Say more about that. You're the first
Yeah,
person I've heard say that.
really.
The
The
fractal
so
approach to
the
writing.
fractals. Yeah, so right, the is it, I'm gonna get this wrong. Mandelbrot?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, yep,
Huh,
Mandelbrot.
got
Yep.
it.
There's also a
Right.
Julia set.
Is there?
It's really Julia, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Right, so you've got this swirl of the fractal, and on the edge of the swirl, there are other little swirls, that are just small versions of the big swirl. And on those small swirls are little smaller ones that are just smaller versions of the medium one of the big one.
Right.
So all the little parts support the medium part, and all the medium parts support the big part. So you could look at the big fractal and get an idea of what the shape is, color, form, without needing to read all the little parts or look at the little parts. You still have a good idea of what this image is. But if you want more detail, you can zoom in and get more detail. And if you want more detail than that, you can zoom in and get more detail. And in a world where people are so pressed for time and we're so busy and we're so overwhelmed, I think it's really important for writing to use that approach. If someone just reads your topic sentence, they're going to know what the rest of that paragraph is about. And if they want evidence, examples, footnotes, they can go and take the time and read that. But you don't want to introduce a paragraph and not tell the reader, okay, here's what we're going to be talking about. So I also look at writing as an opportunity for the writer to provide road signs in a way. So transitions, topic sentences, these are road signs. Say, okay, we're going to be talking about this now. We're going to be talking about this now, and so on and so forth. But the fractal approach, I think about that all the time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, one of the critiques of the CIA writing style, which I always thought was valid, is that sometimes we produced paragraphs that were dense packs, dense
Oh,
packs. They were so devoid of any human kindness that they were impossible to read. And even today, when I read a lot of nonfiction, when I read nonfiction books, I come across these dense packs. So one, do you see dense packs as the enemy? And two, how do you help aspiring writers what
Avoid
would be
that.
the cooking term, to thin it out, to dilute it?
Oh yeah, the dense packs. I think anytime that the reader has to work hard to understand something, then the
Yep.
writer has failed.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
If you have to read
usually,
a sentence more than once, I get
like,
pissed off.
forget it. I
Mhm.
Yeah.
think often the solution is just like break it up into a couple sentences. Like, it's okay to have a couple short sentences. That's fine. Um, there's, this plugin I have on my blog site that's the Fleisch reading test. It's basically how readable is your language. And anytime I have really long sentences, they're like, the little app tells me to break it up. And I do, and I'm like, oh yeah, that actually is easier to read. So I think, yeah, there is this attempt to fit as much into a sentence as possible, but you sacrifice readability. But again, if your customer is a busy policymaker, why are you making it difficult for them to read? Just break it up. So are they the enemy? I'm not sure. I'd be like, get out my sword and bow and arrows to defeat them. I think there are a starting, uh, they're like a block of marble that hasn't quite been
Yes.
carved into what it could be. It's still rough.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like the use of the verb carving, attaching that to writing, because I feel that a lot when I write that I'm carving. And speaking of
Mm.
swords, I spent 2 years in my career being the final reviewer of the President's Daily Brief, a very, very scary and very unpleasant task. But one of my great accomplishments was to finally get the Sword of Damocles into a PDB piece. I know, isn't that exciting? I was
That's really.
I was always so enamored of that phrase, and I finally, I can't remember the context, and that's good, but I finally got it in. What a
I
moment.
used that in one of my college essays that I
Uh-huh.
used for applying to Princeton. So, you know. it must have some magic.
Exactly, exactly. So we're at almost at the hour point, and want to be respectful of your time. But what else would you like to tell Panda listeners about how you help people with their writing projects?
Oh yeah. Um, it really depends on the writer and what they need. A lot of times I'm there as sort of accountability buddy, someone to keep them on track. Most of the people I work with own their own businesses, so their energy is not focused on writing their book. And so I help them look at their calendar, figure out how much time they realistically have to write. I help them organize their outline because I believe that you have to start with a strong and detailed outline, even if you change it along the way. Because if you're just writing, things are going to get out of hand and you'll go on tangents and you'll spend more time in the editing process than maybe you should be. And I give them feedback along the way on style, organization, tone, and just helping them keep on track. I can also help them look at publishing options. I co-own a business, so it's not just me. I co-own Inkhorn Creative, and my partner Tim he's been traditionally published dozens of times. He has written successful query letters to agents, book proposals. So when it comes to time for publishing, I hand them over to him. I'm more the back end crafting of the book. And so um, that's the coaching aspect. In the editing, I'm a little bit more ruthless, sometimes to a fault, I think. um, Again, just looking at editing, cutting out unnecessary words, really editing for clarity. Most of my clients are in a self-help space of some kind, maybe not necessarily like in a sort of uh, therapy psychology space, but a how-to self-help. And when a reader's picking up a book like that, they want to feel that that book can help them as quickly as possible. So if the language is clear and precise, then that book's going to be it's going to be helpful, right? And they're going to get something out of it right away. So really making sure that their message is clear as well. So I'm that first line of defense in a kind of way. If they write something and I'm like, I'm not really sure what this meant, and they say, "Oh, I thought it was really clear," and it's like, "Well, I didn't." So let's see why that wasn't clear and how we can ensure that readers are less likely to misinterpret it. So that's quite a bit, but
Good.
I'm yeah, just a partner in the writing process and looking at setting goals as well. Sometimes it's word count, sometimes it's number of chapters, looking at a timeline. Okay, I want to write this book in a year. That means I need to write this many words in a month, this many words in a week. Is that attainable? Usually it is, which is pretty awesome. And people don't really see that until I lay it out for them, which is a really nice moment. We're like, oh,
One of my
like
favorite things
that.
that somebody said to me once, a book architect, he said that
Yes.
when you've committed mentally to writing a book, then everything you are doing from then on is writing a book. You need to take a walk, you're writing a book. You need to do the wash, you're writing a book.
Yeah.
And I love that framing. That really helped me a lot. Because it
It's
makes
like,
you don't deal with so much guilt.
Right.
Um,
And you need to
yeah.
sleep. You're also writing the book.
you're
I like
also
that.
writing a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that sometimes with my clients. They're like, I feel like I didn't get anything done. And it's like, well, did you think about your book? Even a little bit? Did you let your book rest?
Hmm.
Great, you're making progress.
Yeah, that's how you make bread. Bread is half the time of making bread is resting.
And
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
punching it down.
Oh, I love that. Our metaphor game is strong today.
I feel like that's the editor's job. You're like, just
Yeah,
punch
punch
it
it down.
Just
down.
Punch it
punch it
down.
down.
Punch, punch.
Get all the air out of there.
So do you have, I know you're writing a book and you may not want to talk about that, but do you have favorite authors or favorite books that
People
you
ask me
struggle?
this all the time, and I'm like, I have so many.
Oh,
I have so many. Um, I could tell you one of the books that was really formative for me as a teenager was Damien by Hermann Hesse.
Mm.
Sort of search for meaning in a world that's very black white and finding your own true
Mhm.
authentic self. And I read that when I was 16, which is the perfect time to read that. So if people ask me my favorite book, I'd say that was one of the most
Yeah.
formative.
Hmm.
As far as creativity, um, they're very, very different, and yet they say similar things. One is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and then The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Oh,
Say
Yeah.
that one again.
So, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and then The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Carmen, have you ever done the artist's way?
No,
Oh my
no.
God. You
Oh,
are in for it. It's
The
awesome.
Artist's Way. Okay.
And I want to learn the war of art. That's really cool.
and this one.
Okay, I'm
Carmen,
gonna put that on my list.
Julia Cameron will have you writing morning pages every day.
I did my morning pages today. I
Me
love
too.
morning pages. So morning pages
Forever.
are um, within 45 minutes of waking up, you write 3 pages longhand stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
Anything that comes out, and it's a way to keep the gears oiled,
Yeah,
really.
really
And
interesting.
And you learn about yourself. You just notice what comes out.
I've made major life changes based on things that kept coming up in
Wow.
my morning
Wow.
pages, like
Yeah.
major. So, and the War of Art is a little more pithy and short, but the idea is that um, his big idea is overcoming resistance and taking your work seriously as though you are a professional. Show
Oh,
up, do the work. You have good days and bad days. Beat resistance by doing the work. He has a quote that I love. It's put your ass where your heart wants to be.
a good one.
So if you want to be a writer, well, you're gonna put your butt in front of the computer and actually write. If you want to be a dancer, you got to put your butt in the studio, things like that. The Artist Way is a 12-week program that's much more spiritual. Although The War of Art has spiritual elements too. But these 2 books, I think, have genuinely changed my life.
Very cool.
Um, oh, as far as like nonfiction, I mean, so I can tell you a fiction book that I really loved.
Please.
I actually don't have a copy of it, unfortunately. I think I read it on Kindle. Um, but what I loved about it, I'll tell you that first. No bottom line up front here, is how the world. So it's based in early 20th century New York City in an neighborhood called Little Syria. And so I appreciated the historical setting, but also the way the storylines all meet up and tie together in this neat
Mm.
little knot at the end. So this
Mhm.
is The Golem and the Genie by Helene Wecker.
The what in
I
the
have
genie?
The Golem and the Genie.
A golem.
Gollem. You know, the
Yeah.
golem is this
Yes.
it's a
Yes.
Yiddish, right? A Yiddish term
Hmm.
for artificial intelligence, as far as I can tell.
Right, right. And she's a fascinating character because
And what's her name again? The
the
author?
this is Helene Wecker. This is the sequel, which was good. It wasn't quite as compelling as the original, but
Mm-hmm.
when people ask me for um a a novel that I really enjoyed, The Golem and the Genie is absolutely up there. Um
Very good.
yeah, so I mean so many like few gosh.
I want to
Another
mention a book
yeah.
that I have liked a lot. It's one of the last books I read. Well, one of the few books I've read that I didn't see the end coming. I don't know. Maybe I
Mm.
was reading it online, so I didn't have the heft of the book to measure how far I'd gone by. And I was so sad that it had ended because I could have read another 1,000 pages. And it's called The Idiot by Elif Batuman.
Oh.
And it is a book about a woman's obsession. It's kind of fiction, but I don't think it is. It's a book about a woman who's interested in Russian studies and her kind of journey. And it is just, The Idiot is the semi-autobiographical first novel by the Turkish-American writer Elif Batuman. And it is a Bildungsroman, which I'm not really sure what that means, Bildungsroman. It's a German word, but I don't
Sounds
know.
like roman would be like novel, building
Bildungsroman.
novel,
I don't know. But
builds
anyway,
on itself. Huh.
I love that book. And, of course, she, as a Turkish American, writing about Russia, that's just an interesting space to be in. And I love that book.
All right, I'm gonna have to
Julia, do you have a
talk
book?
about, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
How to Lose the Time Wars. Do you know
I
this
haven't
wonderful book?
read this, and it's on
That's
my to be read list.
unbelievable. I forget the author. I love the book so much. I'm like, I don't even care. But who's the author on that?
It's called This Is How You Lose the
This is
Time
How You
War.
Lose the Time War. Ugh,
I'm looking it up.
it's a beautiful romance between two people who are traveling in all sorts of directions in time, and they're trying to they're on different teams. They're trying not to be in the competition game.
It's co-authors. We have Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's on
Yeah.
my list.
It's
Wow.
I can't say anything more about it, but that it's intricate and beautiful and makes you think differently about everything.
So if you, both of you, just send me an email about the books you've recommended so I can,
Sure.
because I'm not writing notes and I'm going to forget them, so I can link them at the end.
You know, it turns out this is our Panda book club that we've been talking about.
Yes, yeah.
Ah.
So now we come to that point at the end where Julia wants to dance and Carmen doesn't want to dance.
Do you want to dance, Happy?
Sure. I didn't know I was dancing.
Oh, this is something we do at the end. We call it dancing, which means that we mute so that we don't record the actual song, because that way we don't violate YouTube copyright issues. But do you have a song you like to dance to?
I am a dancer, so that's a really hard
I
question.
know.
I didn't realize I had to have my Spotify
Well,
playlists up
no,
here
Yeah,
and
well,
ready to
no.
go.
What do you feel like?
Um,
What are you in the mood for? What kind of music?
I'm just going to bring YouTube up right now so that we can just look it up.
I am a child. I'm a child of the 80s and a teenager of the 90s, so I love some good cheesy 90s dance music.
Got it?
All right. What's your fave?
Um,
Like CNC Music Factory type of thing?
I'm thinking like, yeah, that's
Everybody dance now.
Yep.
yeah. See, you got the psychic memo.
All right. That's what we'll do.
Are we doing everybody dance now?
Let's do it.
Gonna
Okay,
make
so
you
this is
sweat.
the way it works. Is that what it's called? Everybody dance now? This is the way it
It's
works.
called Gonna Make You Sweat.
Gonna make you
Everybody
sweat.
dance now. CNC
Yeah,
Music
that's
Factory.
it. It comes up, gonna make you sweat.
You all done, Carmen?
I also realized this room doesn't work very well for me as a dancing room.
It was funny because it kept cutting off your head, so it
I
looked
know,
like
and I'm like trying to get in there.
that was so
and then-
cute though. You're like,
And then I decided to play with it a little bit. Let me turn off the music.
Thank you, Abby. It's been a while since we've been dancing. We'll have to add that song to the playlist.